Dozens of explosions believed to have been triggered by a ruptured natural gas pipeline owned by Columbia Gas of Massachusetts in communities near Boston last week left one person dead and many more injured, according to WGBH Radio. The explosions have raised questions and concerns about safety for people in this region, where a ruptured Columbia Gas pipeline in downtown Springfield injured more than 20 people, leveled a building, and left a neighborhood devastated 6 years ago. Mayor Dominic Sarno has called for a meeting with Columbia Gas. In a statement, he said the goal of the meeting was to, quote, reassure our Springfield residents and business community of Columbia Gas's continued maintenance efforts to keep us all safe. Jim Kinney reported on the 2012 explosion for the Republican newspaper. He joined me in the studio.
The explanation of what happened that day was rather simple once the gas company gave it. There was a call of gas odor in the neighborhood. Technicians responded. Their standard operating procedure is to find where the valve is in the street, find where the gas service enters the building, and assume that the pipe goes in a straight line between those 2 points, and then use their probe about 2 feet on either side of that line to find the actual pipe. The technician followed that procedure. Went and probed 2 feet to one side of that imaginary line, hit the pipe. It wasn't where it was supposed to be.
And so massive explosion ensues.
Yes.
Talk about what that neighborhood looked like.
Piles of rubble. An entire building was destroyed, and buildings for maybe a block on any side of it were heavily damaged. There's an auto repair shop about 2 blocks away.
Doors blown in.
The front of that building was blown out the back of that building.
Yeah.
Very lucky that no one was killed. There's a daycare center nearby that was not open that day because, as you say, it was the Friday after Thanksgiving.
And so talk about, you said assumed. So the technician who worked for Columbia Gas at the time, Columbia Gas came out eventually and said procedures were followed. The right thing was done. It was just an accident, right? But the DPU had a lot of questions. What did we learn? We're 6 years out from this.
The DPU has had a lot of questions. A lot of it gets back to just very old infrastructure in these cities. And one of the things Columbia Gas has been saying is we need to update all of our pipelines so that this type of thing doesn't happen. One of the procedures they want to do is sleeve all these lines with plastic or replace them. Very old infrastructure, and I understand that they were working in Eastern Mass in the Merrimack Valley when the most recent thing happened.
And so they were working to re-sleeve. Is that the only similarity between these two cases?
I'm not sure. They were working to re-sleeve in Springfield and have been doing a lot of that replace work. That way they would have modern pipes under there, and they would know exactly where they were. One of the questions has always been, when you hit the probe into that pipe, you probably shouldn't have been able to go all the way through it and pierce it like a piece of plastic.
Which caused the explosion.
And they had also, remember, been responding to a heavy odor of gas, so something was not right.
And a lot of people were on the scene sort of working to respond to that call at that time, which is why I remember at the time the Republican reported about 21 people were injured. Some of those were gas workers, firefighters. They were on the scene looking to work for that.
Yeah, the fire department was there.
But I want to circle back to the most recent cases that are happening out east.
Yeah.
So is what happened here in Springfield different than what is happening in the eastern part of the state?
It doesn't sound like there was this worker piercing a pipe. Over the weekend, the same gas executives have been talking about an overpressurization as they were doing a project, as they were working. The cause of that, I don't know, and they haven't said, and will come out in the NTSB investigation. It's a bigger line that's under NTSB control, National Transportation Safety Board.
Right. So in terms of what happened here in Springfield, again, 6 years out, are we still learning about what happened and whether or not we're safe?
There is old infrastructure. There are heat maps available that show you where the gas leaks are. And it largely looks like a population map of the state if you look at all these leaks and where they're mapped out. The gas company keeps talking about they have old infrastructure issues that need to be followed and increasing demand. Remember, natural gas prices have fallen over the past dozen or so years with the fracking in Pennsylvania, Ohio. So that means more people want to use natural gas as a heating fuel, and that increases demand on old infrastructure.
I know that Senator Eric Lesser on Friday called for the Department of Public Utilities, the DPU, which we mentioned earlier, to conduct a statewide investigation of Columbia Gas because he said, quote, there are active projects going on around the piping infrastructure throughout the state, including a potential metering station right here in Longmeadow or nearby in Longmeadow. I don't think those projects can happen until we get an explanation from Columbia Gas on how they're going to keep our communities safe. Are you hearing concerns about people feeling unsafe at this point?
Yeah. Yes, you do around the area. That Longmeadow project has to do with increasing service into the region. And there's a choke point where local gas for Springfield comes over the Connecticut River. And there's a fear that if something should ever happen to that, devastation could ensue.
And so they're now, we circle back to the actual explosion that happened in Springfield in 2012. The neighborhood is still recovering in some ways. There was a building there that you reported about that was proposed to be a mixed-use development back in 2012, and that's still ongoing.
They're still nailing down the Willys Overland building, named for the former car company. It was built in the early part of this century as a regional showroom for Willys Overland cars. The company eventually became Jeep. And it has had a number of uses over the years, heavily damaged in the explosion. They're still nailing down the tax credits. It was sold to a company, Davenport, that also owns Springfield Mall, or Springfield Plaza Mall up on St. James. They want to do some sort of mixed-use restaurant use, possibly on the first floor with the loft-style apartments upstairs. This past academic year, a group of UMass graduate students in their design program took on the neighborhood as a project, and each came up with a plan for it. They found in their research that about 60% of the neighborhood is either parking lot or vacant lot or unused concrete slab, which to them is a blank slate. But it's not pleasant to drive through today.